It really did.
Yeah.
You were right. Good prediction.
So, you've been on the road.
You have too.
I have been on the road, yes. Different reasons, but yes, different roads.
You know, yeah, I've been on book tour. I started out in Houston. Gosh, I think it was last Saturday. And from there, I went to Scottsdale. And then the next day, I went to St. Louis. And then I flew to Cleveland and arrived in Ohio, and I've just been hitting some bookstores and libraries in Ohio. And I have to tell you guys, as you probably already know, the Dover Library is just kind of a special place. The people at the Dover Library are special to me, and very, very happy to be part of this evening.
Thank you, Linda. And to everybody here from the Dover Library, Jim Gill, everybody else, thanks for all the work you did to make this happen tonight. Along with the Dover Library, I want you to know that every year, just because we're nosy, we look at the library to say who circulated, who were the top authors this year. You consistently place top 3, sometimes top, but your books continue to be top circulators. Is that a good word?
I think that's a really good word. I like that, especially the top part.
Well, all right, here you go. Here's another one then. I noticed with the new book, An Evil Heart. I saw some of you carrying it out there. Linda was kind enough to send me a copy before we got here and had a chance to read it, but I saw the one review, briskly paced, suspenseful and gripping. This novel should delight those readers that enjoy police procedurals and mysteries that have a strong female lead character. Now, other than thinking what a brilliant reviewer that person was, what do you think when you hear words like that written about your works?
You know, Bob, I have to tell you, the road to publication was really a long, very long road. I worked in the corporate world for many, many years. I worked for a company many of you might be familiar with, Domino's Pizza. I was actually the franchise accounts manager. I collected royalties and advertising from financially troubled franchisees. So I was basically the person nobody ever returned my call because they knew I was going to ask them for money. But it took me 11 years to sell that first book. And I initially, when I sold my first book, I sold Harlequin. I started out writing romance. And I wrote several books for Harlequin. And I sold a larger romantic suspense novel to another publishing house called Berkeley. And the procedure is the writer turns in the manuscript, the editor reads it, and they usually make suggestions and they send it back. And I realized that I was getting very similar feedback from both of these editors. I had Kim at Harlequin and I had Cindy at Berkeley. And they were basically telling me, Linda, these are romance novels. You need to concentrate on the relationship between the hero and the heroine. And they were basically telling me that I needed to stop killing people.
I'm glad you didn't listen.
Yeah, you know, me too. I realized that I was really writing the wrong genre. That I had always sort of gravitated toward more toward crime fiction. I like mysteries, murder mysteries, and just some of the darker elements. And so at that point I decided that I wanted to write a breakout book. And that's sort of when I started work on the first book in this series, Sworn to Silence.
Well, if we're going to go down this path, let's go a little bit further down this path.
Okay.
You've told this story before about how you put it together with the Amish and mysteries and when that kind of clicked into place. Tell us that.
Yeah. Well, I like to plot. I'm a plotter. Some writers they call them pantsters, which means they write the book by the seat of their pants. They don't know what's going to happen next. They sit down at their computer and they just kind of pound it out on the keyboard. I'm a plotter. I like to write an outline. I like to write a synopsis. And so I quit writing for Harlequin. I continued to write romantic suspense for Berkeley. And I went to work plotting my breakout book. This was my big breakout book. And I was able to come up with a relatively pretty high concept plot. I had some good plot twists. But I had been around the block enough times by then to know that if this book, if I didn't come up with something that would set it apart from the rest of the pack, it was going to be rejected. And so just about that time, I took a happenstance trip. I was living in Texas at the time with my husband. I took a happenstance trip to Ohio with my sister and my brother-in-law. He was born in Fredericktown. Does everybody know where Fredericktown is? And grew up in a 200-year-old farmhouse. There's this gorgeous old bank barn in the back of the property. And so we have a great visit. The day that we're about to leave, we're standing in the front yard. It's like 10 below zero, and there's, snow on the ground. I hear the clip-clop of shod hooves coming down the road, and I turned around and I looked, and I see an Amish buggy coming down the road. Gentleman, flat-brimmed hat, wearing black, his family sort of tucked into the back of the buggy. And it was at that moment that I realized that if I took this high-concept thriller that I had been working on for, several months, 8 or 9 months by that point, and I was to somehow set it among the Amish, bring it into Amish country, I thought that was the thing that would set it apart from the rest of the pack. And so when I got back to Texas, I set to work doing that.
Did you have to convince the people around you that that was the thing to do?
I didn't. When I submitted this book, they knew. I knew. Sometimes you just know in your heart if something's right, if it feels right. Sometimes you're not sure, and if you're second guessing yourself, you may not be right about it. But I knew. One of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to immerse the reader in the world of the Amish. I wanted to be able to explore the Amish culture. And, as a writer, one of the things that really intrigued me was the juxtaposition between, the bucolic beauty of Amish country and then the introduction of something evil into that society. And so that was really what drew me to that setting.
And now the 15th book in the series. 15. That is remarkable. And that does not include all of the other writing that has gone on during that period of time. So it has been a remarkable run with Kate Burkholder throughout this period of time.
It really has, Bob. On our way here, I rode over with Denise, my friend Denise from the Dover Library. We passed by the furniture store.
Where we first met.
Yes, where we first met, which was absolutely such fun. I didn't know it was fun at the time, but looking back, it was very, very fun.
Well, when I was actively employed at WJER Radio, we often did live broadcasts in Williams Furniture. And Linda was I think it was maybe your first trip.
Yes,
town.
It was.
Okay.
It was.
And she was a scared rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
And Jim Gill said, could I bring her down and maybe you talk to her on the air? And I said, sure. And as it turned out, my sister had given me the book. I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before that, I just read the book. And so when she sat down, I said something about Painter's Mills and Kate Burkholder, and the look on your face, because it was clear that you were not used to having anybody who actually read the book interview you.
Yeah.
But when you walked into the furniture store, you're looking around, you're going, what am I doing? But it all worked out.
It did, and it was a great moment, and it's a good memory.
Yeah, it is a good memory. With 15 books, and I have to say, and I think if you're a reader of her books, you probably agree, you have become more and more comfortable with Kate's voice throughout each book. So the question is, where does Linda leave off and Kate begin? Or vice versa? How does that work?
Kate Burkholder has done a lot. She's gone through a lot of character growth from that first book. In Sworn to Silence, Kate Burkholder was not in a very good place. She was, she was drinking too much. She was personally involved with the case. She could not tell anybody that she was personally involved with the case. And she was sort of skating a very thin edge with that first book. And Thomas Setti, who's with the Bureau of Investigation out of Columbus, he was a foe. He was not her friend, and she did not trust him. And throughout that first book, they sort of became allies at some point. And Kate Burkholder, if you look at the way her character was in those early books, she's really grown a lot. I think she's grown as a woman. She's grown as a person, and also as a police officer, as a chief of police. She's come a long way.
How much of that growth comes from you? How much of that growth comes from your editor pushing the growth? How does that all work, Linda?
I think that generally, I think as people get older, we get wiser. And
you would hope. Yeah.
Yes. Well, most people. But I think that, things, you have a different perspective as you get older. And I really think it's a better perspective. I think we have a deeper understanding of people. I think we have a deeper understanding of the things that are important in life. And that's true with me, and I think maybe a little bit of that does spill over into Kate Burkholder. Of course, she's a heck of a lot braver than I would ever be. That's all fiction. But I think that's, Kate's older too. And I think that's, does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. So let's go to the book. How about a synopsis of An Evil Heart? What goes on in this book?
This book was a little bit of a wild ride. There's a lot going on in this book. There are actually, the main story, and then there are two smaller subplots. And the main story is, if you've read the books, how many of you have read the Kate Burkholder books, by the way? Okay. As most of you know, the books begin with a murder. And in this case, there's a young Amish man, 21 years old. He's riding his bicycle down a country road. He's getting ready to meet a construction crew to ride to his job. And he's riding down the road and traveling at a pretty good speed. He happens to notice somebody standing in the ditch and just catches a glimpse out of the corner of his eye, so he stops. And he turns and he looks over his shoulder and he asks them, "Is everything okay?" And as he turns, that's when he spots the crossbow. And, the next thing he knows, he's shot with the crossbow. And, he's down. And when he's down on the asphalt, the killer, who is unknown to us at this point, gets him a second time. And he retrieves the bolts. And an hour later, actually it's very, very soon after that, it's just a matter of minutes later, a young woman taking her children to school discovers the body, and at that point, that's when Kate gets the call.
How'd you come up with the crossbow?
When I originally wrote that scene, I actually started out making it a shooting. And I wrote it, and it was one of those things that did not feel right. It actually felt a little competitive, or it felt repetitive. And I think one of the things that's very important, especially when you have a long-running series, is that you want to keep things fresh. You don't ever want to bore your reader. And so I'm not exactly sure what's wrong with the scene. So at that point, I go and I just start doing a little bit of research on the internet, and I happen to run across this crime in the UK, of all places, where a man was murdered with a crossbow. And the light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, I think that's what has to happen here. And so I was able to research. I was astounded at the power of a crossbow. I had absolutely, I think I could be wrong. I don't have a mind for numbers, but I think it travels at something like 3,000 feet per second, which is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And there, of course, on the bolt, there are different kinds of heads that you can put on. In this case, he used a broadhead, which is a four slot, which is a pretty brutal bolt.
Listen to you. I'll take murder for 25, Alex.
Yeah.
Well, it is very effective, both as a weapon and in the story.
Thank you.
And you are a very prolific writer as well. You have put out a lot of books. What's a typical day like for you?
Believe it or not, I think this is either my 37th or 38th book. which is really crazy for me. I tend to be a morning person. I like to get up early and really drink coffee, go directly to my computer. That's when my brain is fresh. I do have horses. I have an elderly horse. He's 27. George is 27 this year. I don't know how that happened. Missy, my mare, is blind. And I do have a youngster, Chico, who's very bratty. He's my only healthy guy. But I do go to the computer, I work for a little while, I run out, and I take care of the horses. Their food, their pellets need to be soaked and all of this stuff. And usually my creative brain is okay until maybe 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And at that point, I pretty much give it up on the creative stuff and then work on anything administrative or promotional or marketing or something like that.
Do you set a goal? Do you want a certain amount of pages every day?
Yes, I do. The older I get, the more I realize that, I've pushed hard for a lot of years. And so I'm starting to think that maybe I'm going to crank it back just a little bit, because it is a lot of pressure to put out a book a year. Usually, I mean, for many, many years, you work 7 days a week. Usually on Saturday and Sunday, I don't work full days. Even if I can get 1 or 2 pages written on Saturday and Sunday, I'm pretty satisfied. So one of my resolutions, I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to start it, is I would really like to start taking 2 days off a week.
I know many people in the crowd who work have that resolution. It's just hard getting there.
It is hard, but we will do it sooner or later. When the time is right, we will do it.
When you do the tours, of course, we're always talking kind of ahead. We're looking at the new book. But we never really get a chance to talk in front of everybody about the book that was just out. In this case, The Hidden One. Yeah. We sat in the porch last year and talked about The Hidden One.
We did. Now we can talk about spoilers.
Now we can. Yeah.
Maybe.
So with The Hidden One, what kind of response did you get? There were a lot of things going on in that book.
There really was. Some of the responses that I got was some readers missed the Painter's Mill crew. They missed Pickles and Mona and Glock and Skid and all of the crew, Tomasetti, even though they do make appearances. But they loved. One of the things that readers loved about that book is they got a glimpse of Kate's childhood, a certain segment of her childhood when she was a young teenager, and really her first love when she was, I think she was 15 years old at the time. And something else that I thought was very, very interesting, Denise and I had lunch with an Amish gentleman a few years ago, I think probably back in 2019. And he is the one that actually told me about the Kishaquikias Valley. It's in central Pennsylvania. They call it the Kish Valley. And one of the things that struck me about this conversation that we had with him, he had gone there to an Amish wedding with his wife. He said, the Amish are really weird there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to look into this Kish Valley business to find out what's going on. But it's a beautiful part of Pennsylvania. And if it's a very diverse, it has a very diverse Amish population. If you look at Lancaster, Pennsylvania, gray buggies. Holmes County, black buggies. Well, the Byler Amish in the Kish Valley, lemon yellow buggies. And I mean, they deck out these buggies. They have walnut dashes. They have cigarette lighters. Kate is talking to an Amish man looking at his buggy with him. And she's thinking to herself, she can't decide if she's more shocked by the cigarette lighter or that he's smoking a cigarette. So.
And plus there was a historical component to that book as well.
There really was. One of the things that I loved about that book is there were actually 2 mysteries going on. There was the main mystery, a man that Kate had been involved with as a teenager he stood accused of murder. And it was a very serious charge. He's in prison. And but there's also another mystery that was happening at the same time. And it is a very historical, probably some of the most disturbing research. I mean, we were just talking about crossbows. That research was even more disturbing.
Did you get feedback on that from including that in the book?
You know, readers wanted more. And I love my editor. He's very good. Charlie, very good. Been editing for many years. He didn't want to go there. He thought that's too dark. Let's put that thought there so that the reader knows, but we don't really want to get into a lot of detail. And I trust him, and so I did that. I kind of wish I had pushed it just a little bit more, but I trusted Charlie, and so we kind of, you know, had a stopping point that we stopped at.
If you have not read The Hidden One, do you have them here? Do you have some here to buy tonight?
I think we do, yes. It's a trade paperback. It's got a beautiful cover, and you know, I have to tell you a story about that. I took a road trip I live just west of San Antonio in Fredericksburg. I took a road trip to Fort Worth, and I listened to that audiobook, which is a little strange because I wrote the book. And the first thing about that is it sort of illuminates things that I see as errors or things that maybe I might have done differently if I, you know, had a chance to go in and change things. But it was a good book, and I absolutely love Kathleen McInerney as the narrator. So there's no straight through freeway I mean, it's back roads. I'm way out in the country, and so it's back roads all the way. So I'm listening to the book, and I'm either going to take the highway or I'm going to take the business loop that goes into town. I'm accidentally turning onto the business loop, and I'm calling my husband, and I'm like, he's getting ready to kill somebody, and I took a wrong turn. How do I get back out to the main highway? But it was an enjoyable experience for me.
The audiobooks, has your narrator done them all?
Yes, she has. I've had the pleasure of meeting her. She is just absolutely tremendous. I love her. I think she does. Do we have audiobook fans? Do you guys listen to do you like Kathleen McInerney? She does a really, really nice job. There's been one or two times where I've gotten feedback from readers that I think she mispronounced a couple of regional words that she probably just didn't know. I think she's out in LA. So other than that, I really just have a total girl crush on her.
If you've never heard her, if you look up your works on Amazon, there's a little listen sample. They give you a 5-minute sample of the audio.
Right.
So you can, if you choose not to buy or listen to her all the way, you can at least get a sense of who she is and how she inhabits the character.
Yeah.
And she really does.
Yeah, and I've told her she is the voice of Kate Burkholder. She really is. When you know, she captures all of the voices of the different characters. They're all unique, and she stays consistent throughout the entire audiobook, which really takes a lot of talent.
It does take, and the whole consistency is something that really has become somewhat of a hallmark of your, I guess, brand. You've kind of built a brand here. But it has been consistent. I mean, marketing, writing, presentation, and that takes a lot. It doesn't happen easily or naturally.
No, it doesn't. But I have to say, you know, I'm a farm kid from Ohio. My first job was detasseling corn, and I've had a lot of weird jobs during my lifetime. I have to tell you that I'm a firm believer in that the more you do something, the better you get. And I think that has really helped me tremendously in my writing. I think that the more you write, yes, it's a lot of hard work, and there are many times when, you know, writing is not always fun. I mean, there are a lot of days when you would rather be out at the lake or writing Chico or, you know, doing something else. The housework doesn't get done, flowers don't get watered. And but you know, I think the more you do something, the better you get, and I think that has served me well.
You said you worked for 11 years before you sold your first book.
Yes.
What a remarkable sense of dedication to getting this done.
Yeah.
11 years, Linda.
Yeah, I thought I was going to get arrested for stalking the mailman because you know, back then nobody used email, and you would have to mail that manuscript. When I wrote my first book, my first question to myself was, can I write a book? And so I loved to write. And so I would, everybody worked 8 to 5 back then. So I would get up in the morning and I would work on the book. And then I had an hour for lunch, and I realized that if I made every red light if I made every light on the way home, I could make it home in 12 minutes. So that gave me about a half an hour to work on the book. And my husband was going to college at the time, and so I had my evenings free. And so then I finished the book, and I thought, well, I wonder if I could get it published. Because at that point in my life, I was absolutely certain everybody in New York was going to be, where's a cop when you need a cop? I thought everybody in New York, they're going to be breaking down my door. Hollywood's going to be calling. I thought this book is going to be the biggest hit ever on the face of the earth. And of course, I sent it off to every agent and editor, and it was promptly rejected by everybody. And I wrote 4 books that way. And back then, a book takes 9 months or a year to write. And they basically turn into doorstops at that point. And it was with that, it was with the 5th book that I finally made my first sell. And it was a big moment.
So, let us in on a secret. Are you ever able to go back to some of those original ones? Are there pieces that you can take, or are those just continue to be doorstops?
I would say they are mostly doorstops. I look at those as my college education, because a lot of years were sunk into those books. There is one book that the time is not right now to publish it. The title of the book was Cartel. So it was a very good storyline. The time right now is not right to publish that book, but that would probably be the only one that I could go back. It would require a lot of rewriting because basically I wasn't a very good writer back then. I was still learning, and it just wasn't there yet.
Are you a reader as well as a writer?
Oh yes. I don't read enough. There are just so many books. I do have a Goodreads page, and I've got all my books listed, and I read, usually by the time I sit down with a book, it's usually, 11 o'clock at night, and, I'll read for a half an hour, and then, the book hits me in the head, and I'm out. So, one of these days.
So, books or e-readers? Which are you?
I actually use an e-reader. I love books, but especially for travel. My husband and I went to Scotland a few years ago, and they rejected my suitcase because I had it full of books. It weighed too much. So I had to basically roll it out, throw all the books in the car, roll it back into the airport, and then they would check it okay. So I do use both. And sometimes I blurb books for new authors, and that's usually on a PDF, and so that'll come over and I put that on my Kindle as well. So it comes in handy for multiple purposes.
Well, we certainly see things changing at the library in terms of digital distribution as opposed to physical books. The digital distribution just continues to climb. There's still a great demand for physical books. I don't know if that will ever go away.
I think people love, vinyl. Vinyl's coming back. Who knew? Vinyl is really making a comeback. And I think there will always be a love of physical books. I mean, I'm on Goodreads, I read all my reviews. Bad reviews don't bother me at all. I read Amazon reviews, Goodreads reviews. People love the smell of books. They love the feel of them in their hands. And I don't think they will never go away. I think they'll always be around.
Any streaming things going on? Any possibilities for conversion to?
Well, we had an option actually last year. That has timed out, so that's over. And interestingly, with the first movie, it was a Lifetime movie, Neff Campbell was an executive producer, Barbara Lieberman was an executive producer, and Poppy Montgomery was an executive producer. Do you guys know who Poppy Montgomery is? She had a series probably during the mid-2000s, I think, and she's interesting. where she's still talking. My agent Nancy in New York has a film agent, Steve Fisher, in LA, and Poppy Montgomery is talking with him. Nothing has been signed, so maybe lightning might strike twice. You never know.
All right, we'll stay tuned for next year's visit.
Yeah,
okay?
that sounds
very
good.
So there are a lot of things that go on in this book. Some of the things we can talk about, some of the things we can't talk about.
Yeah.
I will acknowledge the fact that it is a minister from Sugar Creek who steps in and provides an important function in this book. And that was good to see Sugar Creek mentioned.
Yeah. I do love that. I spent a lot of time on Street View driving this area, and that was, it's hard to explain without putting forth spoilers. We don't want to spoil since so many people have not read the book. But yeah, Sugar Creek is mentioned.
That one stuck with me because it came at an appropriate point at the end.
Yes, it did. And I have to tell you, the reason that my mind just blanked out is because I'm already working. I'm 300 pages into the book that's going to be out in July of 2024. So that was sort of, spent a lot of time on Street View with that one too.
So on your tour, you started, I think, in Arizona, if I remember the tour right. Okay.
Houston, actually.
Okay, excuse me. So do they ask about the area? You do such an incredible job of describing the area. Is there any fascination?
I think they are interested, but I think people don't know how beautiful Ohio is, especially in the summertime. I think they have preconceived notions about Ohio. I think
we all drive buggies.
Yes, we all drive buggies in Ohio. But I think they are more interested in the Amish culture and how the Amish interact with the English. And I think, frankly, there are a lot of misconceptions about the Amish that was one of the things that I wanted to do when I began the series. Is I really wanted to depict them in a very honest way. And the Amish are good neighbors. They're good people. They're family oriented. They're religious, but they're also human. They're not perfect. And I know there are some Amish set romance novels out there, and some Amish set cozy mysteries. And sometimes they sort of gloss over the Amish suffer from some of the same frailties that the rest of us do.
Well, one of the things you have said consistently over the years is your desire to treat the Amish culture with respect and with a knowledgeable approach.
Yes.
And I think that same thing seems to spill over into the way you handle the procedural aspects of the book, the police procedural.
Yeah.
You have, I know, spent a great deal of time with a variety of law enforcement so that you get it right.
Yes. Yeah. When I first conceived the idea, I knew that I wanted to have a female protagonist, and I also knew that I wanted her to be in law enforcement, and I knew absolutely nothing about cops. I didn't know anything about law enforcement, so I drafted my really good friend Vicki, and I'm like, we're going to the Citizens Police Academy in Plano, Texas, and it was a 12-week course, and sort of a classroom setting. It was at the police academy, and it was absolutely the most enlightening classes that I ever took. They would basically bring in a different department. We met for 3 hours every Thursday night. They would bring in patrol. They would bring in crimes against persons, burglary, homicide. They even had the K-9 unit guys in there. And they would just basically speak and tell stories about some of the things that they encounter when they're out in the community. I got to do ride-alongs with a male and a female officer on 2 different occasions. And one of the more interesting things that we did was at the police academy. It's set up sort of like a high school. There are multiple classrooms and long hallways. So we did what scenarios they called them, it wasn't a shoot, no shoot scenario, but it was like a crime scene scenario where the actual cadets would go into a classroom and they would set up a crime scene, whether it's a barroom brawl or a domestic dispute or a fight on the street. And once I'd had a few weeks of experience under my belt, police officer Linda had to go in and I had to assess the situation and diffuse it. And I can honestly tell you that I would absolutely be the worst cop in the world known to mankind. I screwed it up every time.
Well, it is interesting reading the books and seeing how you have advanced and with the police procedural, and it's getting noticed in the reviews that come out as well. So clearly people are picking up on the fact that you are getting better and better with this. And when I listened to you, we sat here and listened to Sheriff Campbell talk about some of his experiences.
Yeah.
And as I listened to Sheriff Campbell, especially, during that period of time, of course, I was involved with WJER. We were the news operation in town, so we saw it from the perspective a little bit, a different view from it. But the one thing that you show in the books is the way in which she communicates with people. And I think that holds true of good law enforcement, because I would say that in my experience, Sheriff Campbell was always a great communicator in those times when terrible things were going on.
Right.
He'd call back.
Yeah.
When terrible things are going on, Kate will talk to people.
Yeah.
And that tends to be a hallmark of a good officer.
Yeah, you know, early in the series, I think that there were a few times when Kate flew off the handle a little bit more than she should have, and I realized that that is not the right direction. That's the wrong direction for Kate, and I think she is smarter now, and she handles things much more wisely, and that's something that I have purposefully done, especially in the last couple of years, because I can tell you in publishing it was. Police procedurals were difficult for a while, and so I very careful.
You mean they weren't interested in them? Is that what?
No, you know, back in 2020, there were some anti-cop things going on, and so I had to, you know, I wanted to be careful and depict as honestly and correctly as I could, and so I kind of had to get through that.
Didn't we all?
Yeah, we did.
We'd like to take some questions. If anybody has a question for Linda, this would be a great time to ask that question. Anybody?
Last year when you came, I told you that I've been a fan since the very beginning, very first book, and each time I read your book, I think, oh, this is the best one. And I felt the same way. I finished your latest book at 4 a.m. in the morning, and that's hard when you're my age, but it was worth it. You moved me to tears a couple of times. Thank you. You moved me to tears a couple of times with this book. You made me angry for different reasons with this book. And there's a lot of violence, a lot of good and bad passion in the books. And I so appreciate the way you have your characters' reaction and Kate's reaction and how you handle such sensitive, sad issues. You're just a brilliant writer. And
Thank
sure
you.
Appreciate you coming to Dover.
Thank you so much. You really get that book, and that is really what I was going for. And it was very difficult because some of the things that happen in that book, you know, some of the reviews, for example, out on Goodreads, they put out trigger warnings that, you know, this is gonna, you know, it's a sensitive topic, and I think Kate was up to the task, and I think she could have. I was very tempted to have her do a couple of things that maybe would have taken it a step too far, but I really think Kate handled things well. And it was a very satisfying book to write. So thank you for saying that.
Just right.
Observations, questions? Wait for the microphone. We can't hear you.
Not that fast. Do you have any Amish in Texas, and how did you get any of the Pennsylvania Dutch language figured out?
You know, I don't believe we have any Amish in Texas. If we do, it has to be a very small church district. Maybe some of the old order Mennonite. I was actually on one of the flights that I took. I saw them at the airport. I believe they were old order Mennonite because it was a pattern dress. What was the second part of your question? Oh, I would have to credit Denise Campbell Johnson with that. She has supplied me with a couple of dictionaries, Deutsch to English and English to Deutsch. And I still cannot conjugate a verb for the life of me, but I sort of muddle through. And I think part of the problem with that is there's some of those words are not written. I can look at two different dictionaries at the same word, and they're spelled differently. And so I think a lot of the words are passed down from generation to generation and maybe spelled slightly in different ways. And so I just sort of do the best that I can. If I do get stuck, I can either, call Denise and she'll check with one of our Amish friends. And sometimes I've even turned to German. Sometimes even looking at the German language will help me a little bit, even though Deutsch is very, very different.
Anybody else? Oh, go ahead. Put your hand up, Kevin. Good.
I've loved your books since Jim Gill brought you to Dover Rotary meeting, and there's a couple of Dover Rotarians here, so we followed your career. How did you get hooked up with the Dover Library, using them as a resource for your research and things like that? Because I love that you're connected to Dover.
I love it that I'm connected to Dover. Jim, I think I cold called you. I think I cold called you with the second book in the series, and just, I don't know how I got your information. Do you remember?
I think I emailed you.
Oh, you did?
I knew it was set in Ohio, so I
Yeah.
reach out to you. And
Yeah.
you started coming every year after that.
I don't know. There was just something special about walking into that library. One of the things I've noticed, even Ohio in general, people are really friendly in Ohio. Hotels, hotels that I've stayed in. There are even people on traffic. If you're making a left-hand turn, the guy coming on stops to let you turn, and it's like, don't do that. But people are really polite here, and I just felt very much at home at the Dover Library. You guys were just so friendly, so great. You were so enthusiastic about the books, and I was nervous. My very first tour, didn't really know what to expect. I was a terrible speaker, and you guys said it's okay.
Who was here the very first year? The year we had boxed lunches at the library. All right.
Oh, wow.
This has evolved over the years. I think this is a beautiful setting. Sheila Pruny, thank you for hosting us, and Denise, who really became a huge resource for Linda with research, and they're BFFs now, best friends forever.
Oh, yeah. Denise has actually introduced me to a couple of Amish families, and it was, we've had dinner, Amish Ada and Mark, and so it's been tremendously helpful for me to be able to experience that. So thank you, Denise. Plus, she's a lot of fun to hang out with.
I keep secrets.
Anyone else?
We have one over here.
Hi. Last year you had said that you were open to the idea of letting Kate have a baby and actually have one. Is that still a possibility?
Well, Kate is very much aware of her biological clock ticking. I believe it is still a possibility. I don't want to give anything away, but there are things that happen in an evil heart that may take her one step closer to that. So that's really about all I can say about that, but it is a possibility.
Excuse me. You handle the unpleasant aspects, the violent aspects in your books so well and make them so compelling. The coroner's just such a sympathetic character, and everybody, you'd like to think that everybody in that type of setting would behave the way your coroner and his staff behave. And I'm wondering, have you ever had to watch, or did you ever think you needed to watch an actual autopsy? Or just seems like it would be difficult research no matter how you do it.
That's a great question, because I actually went to 2 Citizens Police Academies. One, I couldn't take the same one twice, so I went to the Plano, Texas Citizens Police Academy, and then I went to the Allen, Texas Citizens Police Academy. And, you know, after the classroom setting, we did a field trip to the Collin County Morgue, and it brand new facility. They had the administrative area, and then they had the medical facility, different HVAC for both facilities. And I took a tour of the morgue, and I remember walking in. I'm not squeamish in the least, but I remember walking into the medical facility and into what they call the cold room, and there was the coroner says, "We only have one customer today," and he respectfully draped, kept him draped and everything, but there's just the smell. The smell is there, no matter how clean the place is, no matter how good the air conditioning and the ventilation and all of that. And that made quite an impression. I've never seen an autopsy or anything like that. I did see the autopsy room at Charity Hospital down in New Orleans before they closed it, which was round. It's one of the round, sort of an auditorium, and then the table was down below. But I don't know that I could do that. I don't know. That would be a question I would have to figure out at the time.
Well, from reading those scenes, you can't tell that you weren't there.
Oh.
That's how good they are. And I also wanted to thank you for one scene in particular, and I'm not going to go into any detail, but the one scene in particular with Thomasino and Kate towards the end of the book. That's one that got me very teary.
At the end, did
Yes.
you say between Tomasetti and Kate?
Oh, Tomasetti, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was just
Yeah.
very touching.
It was good. It was a long time coming too.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
but
we're-
that just made it
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
It was
Thank
great.
you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Anybody else? You're going to be here signing books? Selling
I'll
books?
be here signing. Yes, sir.
Wait a minute. Orvis Campbell has a question.
All right.
So if Kate has a baby, and it's a boy, any chance it's Orvis? I don't want any royalties, but
I was just telling Denise that I'm going to have to use that name. I seriously was just telling her that.
you know how when you go in and you're traveling and they have the keychains with all the names, there's never an Orvis.
I know. I bet there's not. It's a great name, though.
Sign it, well, not really.
If no one else, we're going to say thank you to Linda